Good afternoon and welcome once again to Metra Home Theater Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And this week is a redo of last week, Adam.
This is a redo. It's a redo. It's a redo. It's a redo of last week. And actually,
redo.
You know, here's something that we should talk about because this is a really big tech tip. And this is a real one because obviously you and I are running into that right now because of our live stream and everything. But when is it time to call it quits?
Well, it's not 65 because that's too darn close to me.
Yeah. So, and this is a very real thing that we are dealing with here. Unfortunately, the last couple streams that we've had have been a little choppy, and again, we apologize for that.
Failed.
And failed, of course. That's why we're coming back today and going over VLAN with you once again. I'm
not any smarter than I was last week, for what it's worth.
Which the reason I asked the question of when is it time to call it quits is because at this point in time, we called it quits with our service provider. We are in the midst of switching over to a new service provider, and that should give us a much more stable connection so that we could do these live streams better and make sure we don't run into any other issues. It's also going to make our lives much easier in other areas as well.
We hope. It is embarrassing when you are a technology company, but technology you can't control.
Yeah, exactly.
Is causing your life to be tough.
Exactly. So, again, everybody, if we do run into more issues, I do apologize. We are still in the midst of switching over to the new provider. But we're going to do the best that we can to make sure that this gets out there and so that you all can have some good information. So, without further ado,
let's get into it.
What are we talking about today?
So, we are talking about
hit the button for it.
VLANs.
VLANs and VPNs. So really, again, we're just going to go kind of in a rehash of what it was last week. If you did catch it last week, thank you so much. I am not going to penalize anybody who did comment on last week's episode. So you do have another chance this episode to go ahead and comment for a chance to win this 4-channel Spotclops Pro 4K PoE NVR kit.
And how many cameras will it actually support?
So it comes with four cameras. That's why it's a 4-channel. And it has 4 PoE ports, but it does support additionally 12 more cameras on top of that for a total of 16. So
through an outboard switch.
Through an outboard PoE switch. Yep, exactly. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the thing that VLANs. So Brent, what's our first one?
I did this last week, and as I said, I'm not any smarter this week than I was last week. So we'll start with number one. What does VLAN mean? And by the way, I do know that one.
Do you? Okay. Yes. Well, in that case, Brent, what does VLAN mean?
A virtual local access network.
Oh, so close. So close. Oh. So close. Virtual local area network.
Oh, man.
Yep. So basically,
should I just walk away in shame now and get it over with?
It's the first question and you're already done.
Yeah,
so,
I'm done.
Basically, it's a partitioned and isolated broadcast domain within a computer network. Too long didn't read. It's a separate network within a physical network. That's basically all that a VLAN is.
The virtual part.
Exactly. So from there, we go on to the next question.
Where did VLAN come from?
So VLAN was invented by a one Mr. Dr. W. David Sinkowski. I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
You still haven't got that.
Still going to do that. Yep. Now it's Walter though. I did find out the W stands for Walter.
Not Wally.
No. Dr. Walter David Sinkowski. So what he was doing is the doctor was trying to come up with a way to limit the amount of communication over what's known as the collision domain. So no more. He's trying to. We got a comment. No more.
Okay, whoa. Before you get to what he was trying to do, what's the comment?
Okay. This comes from a multi-time viewer of the show. He says no more sugar for Brent before a show. So,
pasta today.
Yeah, pasta. Okay, so what he was trying to do is that he was trying to make sure that we lowered the amount of communication on what's called the collision domain. The best way to describe a collision domain is, let's say you have 2 cities side by side and you have 1 road going between them, right? Now, here's the thing. That 1 road is a single lane road or a 2-lane road, depending on who you talk to, where it's only got 1 direction, or 1 lane for this direction, 1 lane for this direction. And so they're not sharing the 1 lane. It's just we're restricted down to that much. So the problem is that in a normal Ethernet connection, what can happen is it can use both lanes for one direction, while the other one can also use both lanes for one direction, but what you run into is that they may both be trying to talk at the same time, and you're colliding at that point, because it's still using the same communication idea of, well, voltage low is a 0 and voltage high is a 1. It's more than that because, of course, what was it, SAM or spam? Spam?
I have no clue where you're going.
The HD base T, what they do for modulating the voltage.
Oh, PAM5.
PAM, thank you. See, I was close. SAM, spam, PAM, right? Almost there. So basically what's happening with that is that, which is another thing entirely, where they're taking, instead of it being, okay, 0 volts is 0, which it's not really 0 volts, and 5 volts is high, what they're doing is they're giving us 0, 5, 10, 15, whatever, but it's not actually that. But what happens is you've got,
there are variants.
There's variances, but you can go anywhere from a 0 to a 15, so to speak. This is not what it actually is. And that's actually meaning something different than a 0 to a 5, or a 5 to a 15, or a 5 to 10, or 10 to 5. It varies, and that's where the PAM comes in. It's post something modulation, but basically it's just it's giving us more bandwidth down one connection. But
you're going to throw an acronym in without knowing what it means.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, but going back to the doctor. He developed a way for the packets of data to be encapsulated so that only the NICs, or the network interface, network interface cards, maybe, possibly,
it is,
that were designated for that type of data would listen for it. That would then, of course, lower the amount of bandwidth or amount of processing power
and it's
required.
only looking at the shell, it's not looking at all the data.
Right. So let's say, for instance, and actually this is a really good way to describe it. Let's say, for instance, hey, Leo, great to see you. Thanks for joining us in the video. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Let's say, for instance, you take or do you remember, okay, this is great, cereal box, and you open up the cereal box and you get this really cool set of glasses that's red, it's got the red lens or whatever on it. Or better yet, let's go over to 3D video, right?
Yeah, are you going to get to your point?
I am, but I need to describe what's happening first, and so that people can understand it. So what I meant by encapsulating is, let's take 3D video, for instance, the old school style where you had a red lens and a blue lens, right? Well, it's the same idea. You only have 2 eyes, but it's different types of data. If you were looking at a mono versus a stereo image, or a flat image, you're looking at something that's just there. Now, if you were looking at something that had a 3D stereoscope setup to it, to where you're trying to watch something in 3D, what they would do is they encapsulate, they actually cover it in a different color, so that the eye that has the red lens on it maybe can't see that item, versus the other eye, which has the blue, which then color corrects it for that eye. And then the other angle that you're looking at it is encapsulated in the red color, and so the red can see it, but the blue cannot see it, or vice versa. I think that's reversed of that, but that's the general idea of what VLAN does, and we'll talk more about that here in a minute. So that's what the good doctor did. The good doctor, W. David Senkowski.
Walter,
yeah. So, on to the next part.
which leads us legitimately to the next question.
Yes.
Because you semi-answered it. Why do we need VLAN?
So,
dun, dun, dun.
For 2 very simple reasons. 1, traffic congestion, and security. Security being a fairly big one, because, of course, when we look at the security of it, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, the security is pretty straightforward. If I have something, again, we'll use that analogy of the 3D lens. If I have something that is, maybe I don't want the right eye to see, I will go ahead and color it in that red light. So then the red eye can't see it because it's colored in red. Now the blue eye can see it, and so it's able to use that and everything else. Now, there's other things that happens as well. So we can segment out different networks. So say, for instance, we have our main network. Oh, great. Okay. Hey, Lonnie. Great to see you. It's Lonnie says, good day from Collins Distribution. Thanks for these videos. We're happy to do them. We're really
happier when they actually work.
Yeah, exactly. We're really happy that you're here watching them as well. Okay, so when we segment out the networks, let's say we've got just a basic network. Let's go with your house, for instance. And I'm not saying your house is basic.
No,
but
I live alone. How advanced does it need to be?
So in your house, you probably have one LAN. You probably don't have your house VLAN'd out for different
I currently am
things.
not VLAN'd out.
So
I will be.
Which after talking about this, right, you're probably going to look at
yeah, and
doing
it's funny
that.
because after our discussion last week, and and what you and I have done off property on projects.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense to do it.
I'm just lazy.
Really, just about any job could benefit from a VLAN setup for multiple networks.
Well, and
whatnot.
as we've talked about, reserving addresses, VLANs to me is the next step in reserving addresses, so I've got better protection between my devices.
Leo saying you're like Seabiscuit all over the place. I am a little all over the place today. So
you are?
I think I am. I think I'm going off a little bit. So when we look at the network, like your basic network, there's not really a need for it. Now you could benefit from it because it helps with traffic. But what you're doing with security is you're segmenting it out, and you can change it. So let's say, for instance, you have surveillance systems on the network, as well as a guest network as well, or a guest connection for people to come in and visit. Now, if you don't have that separated out or segmented out, they have full access to your security surveillance system. Now, what can they do with that? Well, they may be able to format your hard drive or reset the system.
Now, hopefully you've actually changed the default password on your security system.
Hopefully you have, which is another topic entirely.
But based on our tech calls, maybe not.
Probably not. So the other reason, of course, why you would need a VLAN is traffic congestion. So traffic congestion, what's happening is it's not, again, in your setup, probably not overly problematic because you don't have enough devices on the network.
Be amazed what 3 Ring cameras, what 3 of those Ring cameras are doing.
And that's where the next part of it comes in, because those cameras are always communicating with the cloud. They're always trying to get out and talk to the cloud. And that's traffic. That's something happening at the same time. A lot of it, actually. Exactly. So when you have traffic congestion, and the best way to look at that is, like, for instance, here at our site, we have upwards of probably 1,000 to 2,000 computer systems on the network. Users, and just on our network entire.
Yeah, printers and cameras and computers and phones.
Yes, very much so. So in that case, what we run into, of course, is with all that traffic congestion, even just talking about our VoIP phones, you have so much traffic happening because somebody was making a phone call that it could easily overstep onto some data traffic that a computer system is using, or vice versa. You're using the computer to download a large file, and someone picks up the phone and starts talking to somebody, and all of a sudden it starts going, nice and choppy for them, right?
How's it go?
Like last week's broadcast.
Yeah, like last week's broadcast. It looks just like that. So those are the 2 reasons of why you would need a VLAN. Now, again, just about every job out there would benefit from a VLAN because it helps to segment out and it helps to just put order and control over where everything is going. So I like to use VLANs in our control systems because it just makes things neater and run a little bit more smoothly. So for instance, I'll have a primary network that has all of our automation systems on that network. So the Control 4 controller, the lighting system, whatever else.
Which controller?
The Control 4 controller.
Just checking.
If I was new Crestron, I would say Crestron.
Okay.
You've got the controller on there. You've got the lighting controller in there. You've got, maybe the Blu-ray player, which is IP controlled.
Your Amazon devices or your Roku devices that are controlled.
Right, all of those devices that are controlled by the network or controlled by the control system over the network. And that's really good to do because then now all that traffic is only going directly to a Roku. Now, you run into problems, of course, with things like Apple TVs, where if you are an iPhone user, you can cast something to the Apple TV to be able to see it. So, vacation photos or whatever else.
Which can be a problem if you have a guest network.
Exactly. So, by the way, everybody, thank you for checking in with us. Like, share, subscribe is always helpful. Hit the little bell notification to let you know when we do go live, which, of course, is every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, don't forget, go ahead and leave a comment over here in the chat section or in the comment section below for a chance to win the 4K 4-channel NVR PoE kit that we're giving away. So, let's move on to the next part.
Dun, dun, dun.
There you go.
I thought we had already covered that, but that's okay.
That's basically it.
How does a VLAN work? Because I thought we had already covered that.
Well, and that was kind of what I was talking about with the 3D glasses and whatnot. So I think what I need to do is
let's get a little deeper into the segregation of the data with overall labels. To me, I look at it kind of like, as you mentioned at the beginning, road traffic.
Yeah.
I can either send a whole lot of people down the road on individual bicycles, creating a lot of clutter.
Yep.
Or I can stick them all on the train.
Yeah.
At which point I have one device going.
Right. Yeah, and in that case, which is, in your scenario, is perfectly fine because you don't have too many trains happening at one time, right? You can send everything out there all at once and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it because there's not enough traffic.
Right, and I'm not having to remember this guy, 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 and all. I just got to remember the train from town A to town B.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't have to worry about getting into the different rail cars,
right.
You know, so to speak. So when we do, how does a VLAN actually work? Well, I think what we need to discuss before we get into actually the data itself and how the data works is, well, what does it look like first? So what we run into with the VLAN structure. And actually, I don't know where it ran off to for that. That'll work. We'll draw it out. So, when we do that, would you give me do you have your iPad?
I do.
We'll do a top-down shot. So, with the top-down shot, I'm already there. We start out here with our modem. So, on our modem, we've got, of course, our service coming in. Now, one way to do a multiple LAN setup is, of course, we can just go ahead and order a second modem from the service provider, right? So we can create an entirely different network.
Not on my budget.
Point, but not on that budget. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the biggest reasons not to do it is because of the simple fact that, wow, that's going to get expensive. Now, there's other reasons to use multi-modem setups. Of course, you can use something like a router system that's able to use two different WAN connections so that if one goes down, it can revert back to another one. But again, in most cases, you're not going to be needing to mess with any of that. So what we're going to do from here, bless you. So the idea, of course, is that instead of ordering in a second modem, what we're going to do is we're going to use the modem and the router that we have. Now, normally you've got your single router, and out from the router, it's going to go to maybe a network switch of some kind. And so, let's see, switch.
It's just a lonely router. It's not dating. It's not married. It's just a single router.
Just a single router. Yep. It's it doesn't have any kids though, so it's
that's a plus.
You know, yeah. So the so from the router, we're going to like a network switch of some kind, which is then going out to some different devices. And let's say we've got like an NVR for the surveillance system, and then something else. Now, off of the router, let's say we also have our Wi-Fi connection, right? So we've got our Wi-Fi coming off of there. Now, what happens with a normal setup is that I've got the NVR here, I've got my network switch here, and let's say I also have a laptop of some kind, right? So on this laptop, well, that's off camera. So we've got our laptop. So what happens though is that if I have a guest come in and they're using the Wi-Fi, they're going to bring their cell phone in and they're going to connect to the Wi-Fi, and at that point they're going to say, hey, you know, I'm a malicious friend who, you know, isn't the nicest person, and I'm going to go ahead and connect to your Wi-Fi, and I'm going to do a scan of your network. Well, guess what? As soon as they do that scan, they're going to find this NVR on the network. And so then at that point they can say, well, I'm going to be even more malicious. I'm going to find out the angles of your camera so I know where to hide when I'm coming over to potentially steal something. This is a really great friend, isn't it?
It's one of those rave parties at your house that you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Who do you surround yourself with?
I'm just to be worried about, right?
Is this why you live in the country?
That's why I live way out in the country. So when they get onto the network, of course, they're going to see that, and they're going to see the NVR, and then they're going to say, well, I'm going to take something, and I'm just going to delete the recording, right? Or something like that. Guess what? With the structure of the way that you've created your network, you've given them full access to that NVR by giving them access to your Wi-Fi. Now, of course, the simplest act at that point would just be to say, well, I don't share out the Wi-Fi password to my system. Well, that's great. But let's say you've got a guest network on the router that is still part of the same network. Well, if you give that out without knowing that it's not VLANed correctly, they still have access to it. They can still get in there. So the purpose of a VLAN is simple. I can go ahead and come in here and I can split this right down the middle, right? So what we've got going on from this point, make sure we're good over here. Now that we've got this divide in here, is I can say, okay, the primary system and the guest network, of course, as well, is on its own system over here, which we'll go ahead and split this one more time, like this. We'll give them a Wi-Fi connection over here, and this is our guest. So what this guest is able to do then is they're able to take their phone, they're able to connect to the guest, but guess what? Because we've got this firewall and this VLAN in place, they can't get over to any other devices, which is wonderful, because that means that they can't get in here and mess with the NVR. My art today is just on point. Did you see my cell phone drawing?
I thought that was an old iPod.
Might as well be. Let's see, there it goes. Get that back up there. Wouldn't that make it easier and cheaper? So Leo, yes. If you get Leo's asking if you get a managed switch or a router that supports multiple VLANs, wouldn't that make it easier and cheaper? So actually,
easier, maybe not cheaper.
Well, it's actually even more so than that. It's required. You have to have, and let me back out here real quick so we can talk about that. It's required. You have to have a router or a network switch that is managed or that has the capabilities of a VLAN to actually utilize that technology. Because if you don't have the VLAN set up that way, it doesn't know to encapsulate that data.
Wait a minute, I can't just go down to my local Blue store and buy a $49 Blue router?
A question about that, but we're going to go back to the drawing here. So, now that we've got this laid out, now I can say, well, the guest can't get over to the NVR, but they also can't get over to my primary network. So that's making this even more secure on top of that. That's where all my banking is happening, the streaming is happening, and everything else. So how does the VLAN work then at that point? We see the
what
physical
are you streaming
parts.
that you don't want anybody else to see?
I don't want them to have access to my Netflix. I don't want them to have access to my Hulu or anything at all like that. I want them to be restricted down to their own stuff. I don't want them to have access to any. Well, let's say, for instance, I have like a Plex server of some kind that has all my media on there for that. But I have it set up in a way that I don't have as much processing power to handle more than the people that I have on there. If they gain access to that, then they could mess it up. So, with that, now that we have it segmented out, this is what it physically looks like at this point. Actually, it's not how it physically looks. This is how it's represented digitally. So what's happening here is, let's say that as the owner, my laptop over here, I want to be able to access the NVR. So in order for me to access the NVR, what has to happen is that the data that's leaving my laptop, let's say, for instance, actually, yeah, so the data that's going out, let's say I'm going to do some banking on my laptop, right? So the data that's on my laptop, what happens is it comes out, we've got our data here, and it looks something like this when you actually graph it out for the different parts, like that. So you've got this portion up here, that's the header. This is the actual data down here in this portion here. But up here in the header, this is actually having information like what's the address that it's going to, where did it come from, what type of data is it just regular network traffic or website traffic, yada, 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 and so forth. Now, what happens is that because I'm over here on VLAN 1, what will happen is that this data is going to get encapsulated, remember that word, encapsulated, with the 1. So what's going to happen then is that from my laptop, it's going to leave here and go up to the switch. Now the switch, we're going to pretend that this is a dumb switch. This isn't a managed switch that has that capability for the VLANing. The router is actually going to be handling the VLANing. From there, it goes up to the switch, and then out from the switch, it goes up to the router, and then it goes on its way out. So all the while, when it gets to the router, it has this single VLAN tag on it for a 1. So the data goes all the way out and leaves from there. It's probably agnostic at this point once it gets to that. So we'll put it green at this point for when it goes out, right? So then, of course, the data goes out to the bank, and then from the bank it comes back in and goes all the way down to the laptop. So that's how that works. Now, that's great because that means that the router isn't working nearly as hard to get the data from the laptop out to the outside because it's not having to worry about what's going on the traffic for the other information. Because it's only looking for, on this specific port right here, it's only looking for that 1. It's only looking for a 1 on that tag. Because, again, I'm on that side of the VLAN. Now, let's say that I want to go ahead and access this NVR from my laptop. Well, look, we've got that wall there. We've got that VLAN there. So how do we get across that?
You have to build a bridge.
We have to build a bridge. So what happens then is the laptop says, hey, I want to, inside the router, we've built in this rule that says anything that's on the primary network has access to anything else on the NVR or surveillance network, as well as the guest network, because let's just say we just want that, right? But the guest network cannot access anything on anything other than the guest network itself. So what the laptop does then is what happens over here is we built in a rule that says any traffic that's looking for the IP address of the NVR was to say 192.168.0.50, right? So it's looking for that IP address. So what happens then at that point is the laptop, we type in the address for that, and the traffic leaves and it goes out with this 1. Now, when it gets up here to the router as a 1, it sees the traffic information, where it's going, right here. And it says, oh, well, wait, that information is over here on this second VLAN. So then it's going to take that information and it's going to encapsulate it again with the 2. So from the 2, now we're able to take this information. So it actually winds up being something like this.
You're running out of fingers to hold.
I'm running out of fingers to hold my marker, right? So then we wind up from a red into a red and a blue coming down here to the NVR. So what this information is happening then is it's getting to the NVR. The NVR then does its thing that it's supposed to do, and it sends it back out because it's now encapsulated with that information. And it says, hey, this information is return information back to the laptop. Can I go ahead and have access to send that over? So then it takes it, sends it back to the router. The router says, hey, this is meant for, number 1. Is it okay to send it back to number 1? And it is. So now it can drop this encapsulation of the 2 and drop it back down to a 1 and bring us back to the laptop. And that, my friends, is how VLAN works. I know that's a lot of information all at once, but that's basically how the VLAN works. It takes the information from different networks, or it creates different networks, and then it allows us to route that information from one network to the other in order to give us good protection. It gives us the ability to segregate things out and segment things out so that we're not having too much communication happening at once. And of course, it gives us the security of having a completely separate network for our guests so that we don't have to worry about that.
Okay, then I have another question that's not on here.
Okay.
What hardware is required to set up a VLAN in a residential environment?
Okay, so really great question, because technically speaking, you can have your blue router from the blue store, who's living in the blue world and da-ba-dee-da-ba-die, so that you can have that basic router in place, is so long as you have a managed switch that can do the VLANing portion of it inside the managed switch. Because all the stuff that we just talked about of how it operates can be done just at the managed switch portion, at that level. You don't have to have anything else happening at the other side, because what's going to happen is the switch will then take that information and say, okay, well, ports 1 through 10 is VLAN 1. Ports 11 through 20 is VLAN 2, and ports 21 through 30 are VLAN 3 for our guest.
Does that mean at this point the router is just the bridge between your house and the outside world?
Essentially, there's a little bit more involved to what the router's doing
Other
at that
than
point.
assigning addresses.
Yeah, and it still is assigning the addresses, but it's doing that through the switch as well. There's other things happening, and usually at that level, you're like at a, I believe it's called a layer 3 network switch, and what it's doing is it's handling more of the DHCP rather than the router handling DHCP, and a lot of other stuff is happening as well. But yes, essentially at that point, the router is just acting as the
gateway.
Yeah, the gateway to the outside. Yeah, which is sometimes called a gateway at that point. So yeah, really good question, Brent.
Gee, thanks,
Good question.
Adam.
Yeah. Do you have another question?
Not for about VLANs, but I do have another question.
Do you?
Actually, I have 4 more questions. Are you ready?
Go.
Dun, dun, dun! What does VPN mean?
So we're talking about VPN also because VPNs and VLANs kind of go hand in hand. They're kind of two things to the same coin, two sides to the same coin, yada, yada, yada.
But they both have their place.
They both have their place.
And I'm a big fan of VPNing because I like to make sure my stuff stays my stuff.
Yes. So, Brent,
Adam,
do you know what VPN means? Well,
Virtual Private Network.
Ah, see, you got it. Virtual Private Network.
That one I did know. I mean, it's only, it's not that many options.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly, yeah.
And just so you know, you did type it right here.
I did, yeah, I did.
I can't read it.
No, yeah.
Font's too small, but it's right there.
And I'm going to read directly from the Wikipedia, basically, as to what a VPN is. It provides privacy, anonymity, and security to users by creating a private network across a public network connection. Too long didn't read. It's a way to encapsulate information between and link 2 or more separate networks.
And particularly in the business world, this is very important when you have multiple locations as a business, because you want to maintain the privacy of that data and hopefully help maintain the connectivity level.
Yes. So in fact, using that here, our own Metra, as many of our dealers know, we have warehouses throughout the United States, but all of those warehouses are on the same network.
So effectively, they're here.
Effectively, or digitally, they're here. They're connected to us directly. And so that it happens that way because of those VPNs. We've created VPNs to have those connected. So we can actually, in essence, if I wanted to print something in California from where I am here in Florida.
Well, and we have.
I could simply just connect to the printer through the network, which has one of my local network addresses or one of my private network addresses. I can just log into the printer, send the command to print this over there on that side, and it prints over there in California 2 hours later. But not 2 hours later, or 2 hours before I sent it, right?
3 hours.
3 hours before I sent it.
3 hours before you sent it.
Get that time dilation.
It's that time warp.
So the next question is, at that point,
dun, dun, where did a VPN come from?
So VPN was invented by Microsoft in 1996.
Now see, this one shocked me last week when you said this.
Yes.
Because honestly, to me, VPNs have always been around.
Yeah.
But they haven't.
No. And in fact, Microsoft, again, from the research that I've done, and please, if I'm wrong about this, please correct me, send me information. Of course, you can call me up on 386-492-8584. You can give me a call. That's our tech support line. Or you can email me at adamr@metrohometheater.com. Or you can email Brent at brentm@metrohometheater.com.
Or send him a cabbage.
Yeah, well, sure.
I'll share that video with you.
Okay. So, as far as my research shows, is that Microsoft created it in 1996 for the purpose of creating a point-to-point tunneling protocol to create a secure network between users by encrypting data and forming a tunnel over a LAN or WAN connection. Now, of course, since then, other versions have been created.
In the earlier days, basically, you had to have almost a physical line between the 2 points, or
right.
at the switching office.
Right.
So if you were going through the phone company, you actually had to have static physical IPs there that connected to that.
Right.
So it wasn't a matter of just, I'm out here, but only these two can talk.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at what it's doing essentially is it's like you said, it's creating that connection between all of them, and from here or all the way over in California.
But they're doing it on public roads.
But they're doing it on public roads, exactly. It's like taking your private driveway and extending it out to a second house somewhere else in its private driveway. But it's like you're saying, well, that's the same driveway between here and there, but it's not. It's public at that point, right? At least here in the States. So, which kind of leads us into the next question, Brent.
Dun, dun, dun. Why do you need a VPN?
So, you need a VPN for two reasons. One...
Wait. Let me guess.
Uh-huh.
Security. And traffic.
No. Well, close. Well, traffic technically, I guess you could technically call the second one traffic. But yeah, security is a big reason. So security and linking separate networks to act as a single network. So like I said before, having a printer in California that I can print from here in Florida. That's one of the main reasons to have a VPN.
And if you're putting in orders, that is awesome, because when sales orders go in,
they want it to go.
They got it to go out.
Yeah.
It's got to go out, and the only way it's going to go out is based off a physical print.
Yep, exactly. So for the security portion, and that's kind of what we see today. That's a very simple portion of what's happening, because with the VPN, and that's where you see a lot of the advertising today on like YouTube channels and whatnot, where they're saying, hey, this I think one's like ExpressVPN or something like that. We're not getting paid by them or anything like that. But you get a VPN to show that, hey, I'm in the UK, or I'm in Russia, or I'm in wherever. That way it shows you're from different locations, and that gives you the ability to access things that are not available to you where you normally are.
The simplest analogy for those of us old enough to remember is the BlackBerry.
The BlackBerry.
The BlackBerry.
Okay.
If we were sending a text between us,
right,
regardless of where we were, for all practical purposes, when I dialed your number, that created a VPN.
Okay.
The BlackBerries were not interceptable by law enforcement, by governments. That's why they were enjoyed so much, because it was literally a on-demand VPN between two phones.
Which actually kind of goes into how it works, because with the VPN, what's happening is that it's taking the data and it's also putting an encryption on it. And it's creating that encryption from a couple things. Usually it's the username, the password, and on the newer VPNs, there's a third key that's created or that's generated at the time of creation. and it takes all that information and it encrypts your data with that information. So that way, on the other side, the only way that the other side can get that information and decrypt it is with that key, with that information that you've given
All
it.
three of those things.
Exactly, and it's very strong on the newer styles.
Yeah, it's a long key.
It's a very long key, but that's why, of course, you should not use the old Microsoft one that's still running today that people can use, unless you're only using it to send like gaming traffic and recipes or something like that. So yeah, you would want to use the newer types of VPNs that are out there. But essentially what's happening is it's taking that and going back to the idea of encapsulating, it's encapsulating that data inside of that encryption to keep it safe, and then it's sending it out onto the public road and to where it's supposed to go next. That way when it gets to the other side, it's able to pick it up and say, oh, I open it like this. You know, it put the key in or whatever else, and it opens it up, and there's the information. Now, the other cool part about that is that comes back to linking the two networks. Because what's happening is that I can send information to a private IP address, which if you go back to, I think it was episode 1, in fact, on this series for IP networks, was of what is an IP address. You have a public IP address and a private IP address. So what happens is with the VPN is I'm sending information to a private IP address that's on a separate network across a public IP address. But what happens is the VPN will take the information that's being sent, it encapsulates it, encrypts it, and then sends it out to the address. So what the wide area network, what the internet sees at that point is that WAN IP address, that
Just
public IP
be.
address. Where is it going? Then when it gets to the other side, it decrypts it, it opens up that packaging at that point, and then the information is there for the local network that's over there. And then it just continues on for its traffic to that local network address. That's basically what's happening with the VPN. There's more things that happen with it as well. So why do you need it? Those two simple reasons: security and for traffic. That's yeah, both VPN and VLANs are for the same reason, essentially, or for linking two separate networks.
Typically, your VLAN is internal, VPN is external. Mm-hmm. Typically.
So with that, we come to our last question.
Dun, 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 dun. How? And you've semi-covered this already.
I did, basically.
Does a VPN work?
So just to recap, of course, how a VPN works, it needs a username and a password and possibly a third key if it's one of the newer VPNs.
And it should be.
And it should be. It takes that information and encrypts the data that you're sending over. Even if it's something as innocuous as just something you're printing off a family recipe for sugar cookies. I don't know. At that point, you say, it takes that information, it encrypts it inside there so that anybody looking at it from the outside just sees a garbled mess of data. They don't see anything that's actually usable. So it gets sent out on the public addresses, or sent over to the other one.
Remember, it's just ones and zeros.
Just ones and zeros. Well, it's not, but it is. Sends it out to the other side, and then once it gets to the other side, it opens it up. It uses that information to decrypt it so that it's back into something that's actually usable.
And put it back together.
Puts it back together, opens it up, and then sends it to the device on the other side that needs it. And that's basically how a VPN is working. Now, when we talk about something like a VPN that we see today for like the, how do you watch the Netflix show in the UK that's not available in the US? It's all over YouTube right now, right? So the way that works is basically you are connecting to someone else's private network that has a physical location in those countries. That's all that's happening. That's it. You're just using a VPN to connect to their system so that when you connect to Netflix across the VPN,
Netflix only sees them.
It sees them for wherever they are. I did this, so I can say there's actually setting up when I went on vacation to the Bahamas. My wife and I we took vacation and it was absolutely wonderful. But when we got there, this was back in 2020. No, sorry, 2019.
I'm going to say you didn't go to the Bahamas.
No, I didn't go to Bahamas in 2020. 2019. But when we got there, we wanted to watch Hulu, and well, Hulu is not available in the Bahamas, or the show on Hulu was not available. So it just so happened that I had a client of mine that had a VPN, and I connected to my client's home address and used the VPN to watch Hulu in the Bahamas. And it worked perfectly fine. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. But that's what happens when you purchase these VPNs. You're buying the connection to somebody's physical system over in whatever country you're connecting to. So now I told the client afterwards that I connected to their system. It wasn't afterwards. I didn't. What's that saying? It's easier to beg for forgiveness
than to ask for permission.
Yeah. See, there you go. See. Okay. ExpressVPN. Yeah. Let's see. Mark Silver is asking: is a VPN necessary if you never allow any other access to your home system? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Read that again. Is a VPN necessary if you never allow any other access to your home system?
I think he means VLAN at that point, because the VPN would not be really utilized.
Well, Mark, rewrite that for me if you would, and let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. When you are talking about allowing any other access, if you never allow any other access to your home system, are you meaning that your firewall just is entirely shut off, like you don't allow any kind of traffic whatsoever back into the system? Is the VPN necessary at that point?
Are you picking what websites you can see through the firewall? Or?
Yeah, elaborate for me if you would, please. And Leo is saying ExpressVPN. Yeah, ExpressVPN is one of the ones that's advertised right now. There's other ones out there as well. Feel free to look into them. It's a good thing to have right now with everybody talking about net neutrality and the loss of net neutrality, you know, the past 4 years or so. This is something that is very important. Not to get too political with any of it, but
and if you've got a customer that has multiple homes, the ability to share content
across that
between those homes, music, videos, control of the home safely, a VPN is absolutely the way to go.
Now, there's also another really important thing to talk about when it comes to VPNs, because with a VPN, you are still, even though it acts as though it's the same network, the problem is that you are still going across that public connection, that internet connection, so your ping or your latency is still going to be affected by that, because it has to go the physical distance of that.
And how much data you send and how long it takes.
Yes, exactly. So that's why, for instance, I talked about this last week, but with Control 4, they have their Foresight connection that you use to gain access from the outside. It gives you their cloud access or whatnot. It's a paid-for service, and so a lot of people will try and get around that by creating a VPN from like a cell phone or something else.
Yeah, which they tell you not to do.
They tell you not to do it, and really and truthfully, it's not because of a money-grabbing scheme or whatever.
It's a reliability.
It's a reliability, because when you try and send a command, control systems are looking for the command to come from something local, and so if you try to send a command across the VPN, the latency may be too long for it to hear back from the device.
Where their cloud service has that knowledge built in.
It has that knowledge built into it, exactly, and so then you don't run into too much trouble. Let's see. You have
However,
no
they do enjoy the income.
The experts is saying OpenVPN. That is another one. Yeah. You have no company that at your home. I should say you do not have guests in your home. Oh, okay. So Mark's asking if you have if you never allow any other people into your home, like you don't have a guest network. You don't have Wi-Fi, or you do have Wi-Fi, but you never share out the Wi-Fi
Then I would just
password.
put a good firewall in.
Put a good firewall in, and honestly,
because it's still people on the street.
Yeah.
As long as you got Wi-Fi, they don't got to be in your house.
Well, we talked about this last episode, the one before last week's, talking about the network equipment. And honestly, he's right. Put a good firewall, but have an actual, what they call appliance. That's what they call hardware-based appliance. Or hardware-based firewall that is just that. It's just a firewall. It's the same idea where you have an all-in-one. You have a printer, scanner, copier, fax machine, all that kind of stuff in one, and it does all of that stuff okay. But if you have a separate printer, it works wonderfully. You have a separate scanner, it's able to do it much better. It's when you have those separate devices, yes, your ISP's modem, router, Wi-Fi, firewall combo piece is
acceptable.
It's acceptable. It'll work. But if you're looking for the utmost security or utmost control over that, get something that's like a separate firewall piece.
So there's a reason that Hi-Fi comes in separates, not in one package.
So so he's asking, Mark's asking, better question, when is a VPN or a VLAN needed? Again, that's actually going to come down to,
my opinion,
we'll break it down.
Based on what we've learned, all the time.
Fairly often. Now, a VPN, maybe not, because it depends on the traffic. VLAN is, and let's actually talk about VPN, because VPN, it's going to come down to what are you trying to use the VPN for? Are you trying to use it for security reasons so that you can have, better security for whatever you're doing, banking, whatever else? You don't want to have your ISP monitoring what it is you're doing at that point, which is a legal thing for you to do. They don't have to see the traffic that you're doing. And so having a VPN will mask your traffic to make sure that they can't see it. If you're doing it because, let's say, you have your home network and then you have your office network, and you want to be able to communicate across those locations safely, then a VPN is also good for that. So that's basically where the VPN is going to come in.
A VPN in and of itself for one location. A VLAN's a better choice with a.
Well, in the VLAN, the VPN is really just going to be, if you're using it in one location, it's going to be for security reasons. So you're connecting to a VPN service. So you get better security for the information that you're communicating with, or to show you're in a different location, anonymity with it, yes. Now a VLAN, in a VLAN's instance, the reason you want a VLAN is to segment your network locally. And the reasons, of course, are going to come down to, I have it drawn out here. So segment out like your main automation network. So that's where all of the equipment goes. So Control 4, Lutron, Lightning
and honestly,
System,
there's a lot
Vantage.
more traffic in your automation world than you think there is.
Exactly. So that's going to segment that out to its own network. Now it's also going to give you a main like homeowners network where all of your traffic is normally happening. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I did. That's why I was.
So what's happening there, of course, is that all the traffic, the normal browsing traffic, banking, Netflix, streaming, all that kind of stuff on somebody's laptop. They get on Facebook through that network, all that kind of stuff. Then, of course, from there, you have your guest network. Now, the guest network is segmented out to where there's no communication happening except from the guest network to the outside.
By the way, highly encourage, even if you don't think you're going to have a lot of guests, have a guest network that you may not put a password in, but definitely segregate what you're doing in your house.
I would still put a guest password in place, but maybe put it something like your last name or something like that, because then it's something that you don't have somebody driving by and using up your internet traffic for whatever reason, maybe a neighbor or something.
Use your internet traffic.
Yeah. And then you can have a network dedicated to like Internet of Things devices. So like Alexa or Google or, all these other devices, the smart home,
washer and dryer,
all these other things that are out there, all the 2U-based devices and whatnot that connect to Wi-Fi to communicate, but we don't want them to be, what's going on here? Go away. But we don't want those devices to have access to my banking information. So I'm going to create another, it's basically a guest network at that point, and put all of those Internet of Things devices over on that other network, so where they only have access to the internet at that point. Because in those cases, those types of devices usually only talk to the server anyways. So let's say you pick up like
but those type of devices can still be a backdoor.
Exactly, and that's why we don't want them to be on your primary network. So it doesn't matter if they're on a completely segmented network on a VLAN by themselves to where they have no traffic outside of that VLAN, or even traffic in from that VLAN. You can shut that down as well, because at that point, like the smart light switches or smart outlets and whatnot, those commands are still coming from usually a server somewhere, then down to the device. So you're sending a command from your phone up to the server and then back down from the server to that device, even if you're on the same network. That's
even if you're in the same house.
Even if you're in the same house on the same physical network.
Yeah, it's not a direct connect internally.
Leo is, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can break it down even further. You could even say, hey, the kids, you're on your own network over here. And Leo says this actually. He says, I don't even give our family internal access. Everyone gets friend zoned. It's not a bad thing to do. You put all of your family and everything on a separate network so that they don't accidentally get in and mess with anything.
And if they get put on restriction, it's a whole lot easier to restrict them if they can't get into the primary access.
Exactly. So with doing something like that, it's worth it to...
Not that I would, be the kind of dad that would restrict kids.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In a heartbeat.
So, Mark is saying, Leo, you're mean.
In a heartbeat, Leo.
And not for nothing, honestly, I can see where he's coming from, because if my kids are smart, they're very smart. If I were to have an automation system in my own home, and they were, they had their own laptops and their own connection and whatnot, they could very easily learn how to get in and start messing with stuff. And I don't want them turning on my lights in the middle of the night as a prank or something, and doing something like that.
They wouldn't do that to you, would they?
No, never, never. Well, and even on accident. Let's say somebody gets in and they're doing something.
You have no automation in your home right now?
I have no automation in my home right now. I take that back. I have you're gonna love this. I have a Logitech Harmony remote in my home right now.
That's it. Cancel the broadcast. I was just thinking I could sign in and and turn on your lights.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course.
Because I would never do that.
And not for nothing. Again, I'm sure everybody in the industry has heard that Logitech is no more.
Will be very shortly.
Pardon me. Harmony is no more. Logitech is still around. They're still doing keyboards and mice and other stuff, for that. But they're shutting down the Harmony portion of their stuff. So, which is a little upsetting for me because I thought they were good.
For those of you on the left coast that have not heard, Fry's has announced their.
Oh yeah, Fry's just today.
This afternoon. Yeah,
Fry's just announced today they're shutting down their stores. And so anybody who's still dealing with them, our condolences, of course, for, we hate to see that happen for any company out there to shut down, but
and
it's
they were one of the more entertaining ones.
Yeah.
If you've never been to one of their stores, they were generally themed.
Yeah. So, Mark, I hope that answered your question as to when you should use a VPN of some
Always.
kind. But we love hearing those questions. We love hearing all of this. No, he's the X10 guy. Mark is saying, I would have thought you were an X10 guy. Yeah, no, he's the X10 guy. He's dealt with that.
Not, thank God, no more.
I was on a job site that had some kind of keypad of some kind, and I had no clue what it was. I was like, I don't even know what to do with this thing. I don't know what kind of wires behind it. Took a picture of it and sent it to him. And he says, oh yeah, that's an X10. And he says, well, he told me, he says, are you ripping it out? And I'm like, probably. He's like, I want it.
There's 256 addresses there.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, guys. I think that's going to kind of cover us for today. We're right at about an hour's worth of an episode, maybe about 50 minutes or so. As always, if you have any questions after the fact, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. You can, of course, reach me at adamr@metrohometheater.com, or you can reach Brent at
Brent M. at metrohometheater.com. And we will have an updated screen for you next week.
Yep. Or you can call us on tech support. That's 386-492-8584, which you should actually see that down there in the corner as well. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to help out. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. The experts are saying my dad still uses it and swears by it.
Now, here's the thing. Just for what it's worth, assuming your house is properly wired, because if you had crap wire, X10 picked up a lot of bad noise, but assuming you did it correctly,
oh boy,
they had all sorts of really cool modules. They had IOs, they had relays, they had doorbells, they had garage door openers, they had dimmers, you could do timer functions. There was a lot you could do for not a lot, and an IR one.
So Mark's actually saying, he says, I have a box of 50 pieces of X10 in stock.
No.
Are you sure? You sure? Mark, give us a call, buddy.
No.
Go ahead and give Brent a call. Let him know that what you got. We'll see.
They are fun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
No, you don't understand. Back when that was the only automation, there was whole cults.
Oh yeah.
Devoted to X10.
Oh yeah. All right, guys, let's go ahead and wrap this one up for today. Everybody, thank you for checking in with us. It's been great.
Don't forget Facebook,
Instagram, Twitter, couple other
LinkedIn?
places, of course. Yeah, LinkedIn are there. Like, share, subscribe this video, and of course,
tell all your friends and neighbors.
Hit the bell notification. We are up to 1,305 subscribers.
Congratulations, and thank you.
So thank you for subscribing and watching our shows. And of course, share it out. Let's see, I used it in my last house, and it did work great. Yes.
And they did.
Moving on. Guys, thank you so much for checking in. That was from Mark Silver.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you again.
I'm Brent.
We'll see y'all next time. I'm Adam.
Reboot early.
Reboot often.
Turn off CEC.
And call tech support.
Don't cut your wires too short.
Don't cut your wires too short. That's what we missed. There it is. All right,
Have
guys.
a good day.
We'll see you next time.